Hi, my name is Paul Henczel. I'm an author, speaker, and co-host of the Inspiring Influencers show. Today I'm going to share with you when you change your story, you change your life. How embracing my story has helped me, and how stories can help you better connect with your listeners and build community around your message. I'm also going to give you tips on how you can develop your own story. I want to thank Alex Sanfilippo for having me on to do this pod talk. Now here's the story that turned my life upside down. I was working as a supervisor in a sawmill, and I had to unjam a giant log that got stuck. The logs we were cutting are called cants. Cants are extremely large and heavy pieces of wood. Now I made a decision to crawl into a very tight confined space to manually free up this cant that was stuck against a large steel beam. Now as soon as this cant was freed, the machine started and I was immediately being crushed alive by 12,000 pounds of wood. I could hear my body cracking, gurgling, and crunching. It felt like my head was going to explode. There was so much pressure. I thought to myself, if this doesn't stop, I'm going to die. I then blacked out. Now, I was not breathing and without oxygen for 12 minutes. And my coworkers had to perform amazing feats of strength just to rescue me in that time frame. By the time I was freed, everyone thought I was dead. Now, right before they were about to perform CPR, miraculously, I started breathing. But the immense pain was overwhelming. I was rushed to the hospital where there was a lot of confusion and panic. I was told directly by doctors and paramedics that I had an anoxic brain injury, a crushed Adam's apple, a punctured and collapsed lung, multiple broken bones, and severe soft tissue damage. But their main concern was for my organs because they were failing. Now, I didn't understand what was happening, but something had to change because I thought I was going to die. But then I was touched by an angel. It was my wife. I now had hope because I wasn't alone. Now, my accident has left me with numerous physical and mental injuries, including a permanent brain injury and severe PTSD. Now, my recovery has been long and challenging because I had to learn everything all over again. I've had to incorporate numerous physical modalities and mindset strategies to help me. Now, Vince Lombardi said, "The greatest accomplishment is not in never falling, but it's in rising again after you fall." You see, I'm here today because I got back up. Now I want to share with you the life-changing strategy that's helped me the most. It was embracing and sharing my story. You see, it was emotionally healing and it helped me to move forward. I was able to see that this wasn't the end, but the beginning. And when I changed my story, I changed my life. Now, sharing my story has opened me up to a world of possibilities I never thought possible. Now, Wayne Dyer said, "If you believe it'll work out, you will see opportunities. If you believe it won't, you will see obstacles." Now, a few years back, my wife and I went to see Brendan Burchard speak in Vancouver, Canada. Now, his stories were captivating and he inspired the audience. But I envisioned myself that day speaking on a very large stage like that in front of a few thousand people. Now, I had no idea how that was going to happen, but I believed. Now, the first thing I did was I wrote my book, Crushed Alive. I then started sharing my story in front of family and friends. Then networking events, which led me to speak on TV, the radio, and the TEDx stage. I then spoke to Penn State University and was invited to speak at numerous large international conferences. See, my vision became a reality. I've moved from an injured mill worker to an international speaker. Now, why should you strive to incorporate more stories in your life and your podcast? Well, I'll tell you. When I first started sharing my story, I noticed that everyone else wanted to share their story in response to mine. That's why I call stories connection magic. This fascinated me. So I researched storytelling, and I found out that storytelling is one of the most powerful ways we have to communicate and motivate. And it's because we think and learn through stories. Now there's more. In 2006, a study was published in the journal Neuroimage. Researchers in Spain determined that when it comes to inspiring people to understand a new change in themselves, storytelling is the most effective. Now, stories also activate up to 7 areas of our brain. So not only are the language processing parts activated, but any other area in our brain we would use when experiencing the events of the story ourselves. And that's the same for the listener as it is for the storyteller. It's fascinating. Now, research has also shown that listening to stories can decrease cortisol levels. Now, that's the hormone released in our body that relates to stress. But listening to stories also increases oxytocin. That's the hormone released in our body that relates to love, empathy, and human bonding. It's just fascinating. Now, have you ever heard a great storyteller and you told yourself, hey, I wanted to do that. I want to do that to keep people on the edge of their seats. You can, you just have to practice. Now, maybe you thought you don't have a good story, but what you don't think is good could be exciting to someone else because others see your story from a different perspective. You see, the situations we have gone through to get here may be different, but there are similarities in each of our stories that you can draw from. Now, we have a framework we use for creating compelling stories, and you can use it too for your podcast, interviews, or a talk. It's got 3 parts. I'm going to share it with you. It's called Story Teach Tool. Now, the first part is story. This is where you share what is uniquely you, and I encourage you to show vulnerability. Now, we've identified some story themes that can help when developing your story. These follow the hero's journey. The adversity theme. Now, the stories of struggles and challenges are the stories that need to be told. Hearing how others have risen above is inspirational because it shows the hope and possibilities in a situation, and it reminds us that we are not alone. Now, change happens in this story that can make life even better and more fulfilling. And the next theme is achievement. Now, in this story, you've experienced success. Now, at the core of every achievement, there is an awareness of the difficulties that are present and then having the confidence, persistence, and patience to realize your goals. Now, you may have tried something and failed, but you learned from what went wrong, and that taught you the right way. And the last theme I want to mention is the adventure theme. Now, this story includes a bold or unusual experience that involves some risk, a major life undertaking. Now, it could have resulted in a discovery that led you to develop a particular product or service, that aha moment. Now, when developing your stories, you don't have to restrict yourself to just one story theme because most great stories combine elements of a few. Now, if you've noticed, these themes follow the conflict to resolution plot arc, which is always inspirational to the listener. Now, it's so important to convey how you moved from a struggle to a solution. How did this transform you? Now, I also want to dispel the myth that you have to be naturally social or outgoing to share your story. You don't. You just have to be passionate in who you are and what you do. And I can't stress enough how important it is to keep your stories simple. So, use shorter sentences, 10 to 13 words. Use shorter words. Now, why use a 4-syllable word when you can use one that has 2? And you do not need to share every detail, just the most important ones. Now, the second part of our framework is called teach. Of course, this is where you give your tips and teaching points, the lessons you learn from your story. Now, this helps establish your expertise on a subject and as a leader. Because there's two ways to share the knowledge you have. Now, you can push the information out, or you can draw people in with a story. So I encourage and challenge you to be creative and incorporate different forms of story into your learning. For example, metaphors are a great way to bring variety to a topic. And the third and last part of our framework is called tool. So this is where you give your tools, resources, gifts, and soft offerings. Now, the most important thing to remember is connecting with your audience, building community, and you want to leave people wanting more. Now, if your stories and teaching points are compelling, people are going to want to get to know you more. So have a clear and concrete way for people to connect with you further. Now, offer a lead magnet that relates to your story, teaching points, or help solve a problem. Now, for example, I have two gifts for you today. The first one is a free digital copy of my book, Crushed Alive. And the second is a copy of our workbook, the Story Framework, Story Teach Duel that I talked about today. Now, you can access those at inspiring.show. Now, these are all great ways to better connect with your listeners for your podcast and build community. Now, it's my passion to empower and inspire others to find their voice. So I encourage you to share your story and embrace your story and start telling yourself you can. Do you remember the wood I was crushed by are called can'ts? Thinking of all the things you can't do can also be crushing. Let me explain. I would tell myself, I can't recover from this. I can't live a fulfilling life. I can't share my story and inspire others. You see, I was crushed by can'ts, literally and figuratively, but now I'm crushing my can'ts. You can too. Thank you very much. And remember, you have a story and your story matters.